Tonight on the Daily Debrief.
He said that's what it was. It was trash that he had inside the vehicle.
Sheriff's deputies smell something disgusting.
He said, all you need to know is in the SUV.
It was the scent of 5 dead children. Why did their father kill them? Also in Vermont, conflicting testimony over whether a man was legally insane when he drove the wrong way down an interstate and killed 5 teens. And a look ahead to the upcoming case of an alleged tight-end tyrant facing rape charges in California. Real-life cases are happening nationwide. This is the Daily Debrief for Thursday, May 16th.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Debrief. Glad you're with us this evening. Day 3 of a death penalty case out of South Carolina. Timothy Jones Jr. admits to killing his 5 children, ages 1 through 8, and then driving around with their bodies in the back of his Escalade for more than a week. Authorities say he strangled 4 of the kids and beat another one to death. Jones is arguing insanity. A jury of 10 women and 8 men are deciding his fate. That's before they pull out the alternates. The case has moved toward testimony from officers who caught the defendant at a simple roadblock where police checked for drunk drivers. It was the stench which tipped them off. First garbage, then drugs, then death.
At the time, it was a black Cadillac Escalade approached the checkpoint. At the time, he got to the checkpoint. He let the window down. I shined the light up in there. And as he's come up to the checkpoint where we was at, by me being narcotics, I can smell burnt smell of marijuana coming from the vehicle. So basically, you know, as I was getting his asking for his driver's license, and I was getting his driver's license from him, and the more I talked with him, I got another smell, and it was a odd smell. And I asked him, what was that? And I said, it smelled like garbage, you know. And he said that's what it was. It was trash that he had inside the vehicle. And at that time, I recall Deputy Thompson saying, what kind of person to have garbage all like that in a vehicle like this?
So suspicions were raised, and next the Sheriff's Department in Mississippi made the link between the car, the defendant, and the missing kids.
There was an NCIC hit from South Carolina.
Yes.
On the welfare of 5 children that were supposed to be in that vehicle.
Yes, ma'am.
You identified the vehicle.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
You identified the defendant, Timothy Ray Jones Jr.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
But you could not locate the children.
Correct.
And as a result of that, what action did Smith County Sheriff's Office take?
Like I said, at the time, Under Sheriff Morty Patterson, he advised us to stop, and he pretty much took over everything from there by contacting South Carolina.
So at that point, contact was made with authorities here in Lexington County to advise them that the children were not located within the vehicle.
Correct.
Then the authorities asked Jones about his children. The response was chilling, and it was mixed.
When you open the door, tell the jury what happened next.
I asked Mr. Jones where his children were, and at that time he advised that he did not have any children.
So you asked him where his children were, and his answer was, I don't have any children.
Yes,
Is that correct?
I believe so.
Based on that, what did you do?
Spoke again with Under Sheriff Patterson, advised him what Mr. Jones had said.
And
Under Sheriff Patterson advised to ask him again. At that time, returned to the car and asked him again. And I believe that time he said he had 3 kids.
so Under Sheriff Patterson said, go back and ask him again.
Yes.
How much time is there between the first time you asked Mr. Jones and the second time?
Probably a matter of seconds.
The second time you asked him how many children you have, and he said
3.
3. Did you ask him anything else about the children?
I don't recall if we asked him where they were or if he volunteered the information, but the comment was made that they were in South Carolina.
So was that on the first?
The second time.
Second when he said he had 3.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He said the children were in South Carolina. Did he say where the children were?
I don't recall if he said where they were, if he just said that they were in South Carolina.
Remember, Mississippi authorities caught Jones with drugs, and the National Crime Computer said His kids were missing, so they booked him, and they were met with this disturbing comment.
Okay, we went through the booking process and got through, and I told him that I wanted to talk to him about the children, and he said, all you need to know is in the SUV.
Next, the undersheriff told the jury how defendant Timothy Jones directed him to the spot where Jones buried the bodies of his 5 children.
How far was that trip?
About 200 miles from where we were, from Raleigh.
When you left, did you have any idea it was that far away?
No, absolutely not. Timothy Jr. was with us, and he indicated that a road that we needed to go up, and we went up that road, and just about the time we got on the road, he said, no, this is not it, this is not it. So we came back to the main highway and continued on, and probably the next road, or not very far down the road, he said, this road right here, and we went up that road, and he said, there, the bodies are right there, and they were.
What, if anything, were they in?
They were in black plastic garbage bags.
Were they right on the side of the road?
No, they were laying in a, apparently they had been doing some logging there, and it looked like a brush top, and the bags were thrown over in the brush top.
What did y'all do with Mr. Jones at that time, once y'all located the bodies?
Once we located the bodies, we carried Mr. Jones back to Smith County.
Y'all didn't keep him on the scene for any time?
No. No, it wasn't, and we done that for his safety too, because we didn't know.
A forensic scientist in Mississippi examined a Jones vehicle. Inside, she found bleach, blood, and possible human tissue.
Now you can see the what appears to be the bleach stains, quite a bit of reddish brown stains that are actually running from the back area down to the door track. Well, that's actually a pooling there on the track of the on the bottom edge of the photograph. I have in my notes that there's a presence of maggots, so there was a lot going on there. That's a photograph taken from the passenger front door area. The photograph is showing a huge discoloration where, in my opinion, is the use of bleach. That's a photograph after items were removed from the very back, and the hatchback area, if you will. And that's just an overall photograph of that empty area. There's a presence of what I collected that appeared to be human tissue with hair.
That same witness came across a list the defendant apparently wrote out. Some of it's hard to understand, but here are some of the items. And this is the list in the defendant's own handwriting. Head to campground, melt bodies, sand bones to dust or small pieces. And then there's a list day by day. Day 1, burn up bodies. Day 2, sand down bones. Day 3, dissolve and discard. The rest of the list contains names, a list of bills to be paid, and in places, circles with initials. This case kicked off with testimony from social club organizers and from school officials who noticed the 5 kids were missing.
I felt comfortable. I knew Mr. Jones, so I did get out. We walked to the front door and we knocked. There was no answer. It was very quiet.
Looking here at State's Exhibit 8. So you go up on the porch and knock on the door?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you hear any indication of anyone inside that residence?
No, ma'am. It was eerily quiet to know that 5 children lived there. It was obvious that no one was there.
And what was your response to that?
I became extremely concerned. My heart dropped because at that point we had had absolutely no contact since that previous Thursday, and in my mind they had disappeared. They had vanished.
Also earlier in this case, a neighbor who babysat for the Jones victims recalled a conversation with the defendant after he and the kids went missing, but before he was arrested.
You're reminding him to bring diapers, and his response back to you is,
Busy, question mark, yeah.
okay. What'd you say back?
I said, okay. I didn't quite understand what that meant, busy.
All right. What happened next, Ms. Elkie?
He called. He said that he had left South Carolina, that he needed a fresh start, he and the kids, and they would not be returning. He said that he knew he owed me money and for babysitting, and that he had taken everything he needed from the home, and I was free to get whatever I needed out of the home to compensate for what he owed me. He mentioned the washer and dryer, his computer, things that I guess were of value, or he thought that I could sell to make the money back, I guess. And that was it.
This is a red letter edition of the Daily Debrief because we are joined by not one, but two judges tonight. Judge Brandon Birmingham is with us from Texas, Judge Ashley Wilcott here from Georgia. So Judge Wilcott, this list that the defendant wrote out is really disturbing for me. It's like a grocery list or a list of errands to run, but this list is about how to clean up after 5 murders. I think it's proof the defendant was sane and that he was thinking things through. Am I wrong or am I right?
I agree with you. It's premeditation, and he's writing down day 1, day 2, day 3, each thing he needs to do to dispose of the bodies that he's killed. Now, is defense going to argue, so what, he wrote it down, he never did it? Probably, but I think the fact that he planned it, Aaron, and wrote down a specific plan is evidence against him.
Okay, the defense could turn around and say, well, he was lucid after he did it. After he did it, that's when he started planning how to clean it up. Judge Birmingham, does that defense stick, or does the weight of the evidence just knock it right over?
Well, I think that the defense is really going to play up something that we saw. This is always one of my favorite cases to refer to, the great Clarence Darrow, Leopold and Loeb, all those years ago. He basically said, and his defense was, there is no other explanation for the peculiarities in this crime except for the fact that they are the result of a diseased mind. Why in the world would a guy who is sane go from having a good job at $81,000 a year to murdering his 5 boys? I mean, his 5 children. The only explanation the defense is going to have to say is that he was insane at the time of the killing.
And certainly that's where they're going here. So Judge Wilcott, back to you here. The defendant led the authorities to the bodies. That description of how that interaction went down, I thought was one of the most chilling things that I've listened to on this broadcast in a long time. Again, this is evidence that plays so heavily into the state's favor.
Right. Again, premeditation. And he walked he just confessed, right?
Mm-hmm.
He told them, oh, this is where the bodies are, drove them there, told them where they were. And then you hear the description, Aaron, about the smell in the car, the fact that they were in trash bags. That's how he disposed of them. The amount of blood in the car as a result of the pooling and the maggots from the kids being in the car, really just terrible circumstances.
Exactly. Judge Birmingham, quickly here, the ultimate question is whether basically the defendant knew right from wrong.
That's right. You've got lying when he told the police that he didn't know where his children were, that he didn't have any. You've got, I think one of the things that's going to be very powerful is the bleach that was used in the car and the hiding of the bodies. He didn't want those bodies to be discovered, and he didn't want the blood to be tied to his car at all. So he bleached it, and that's going to be strong evidence for the prosecutors.
Exactly. A heartbreaking case out of South Carolina. Judges, will be back with you at the end of the broadcast. We are preparing to cover a major case out of California next week involving a former professional athlete accused of sex crimes. Rachel Stockman has this look ahead.
A former star NFL player now on trial for charges of raping 3 women and exposing himself to 2 others. But former Cleveland Browns tight end Kellen Winslow II denies the accusations.
I'm an innocent guy. I'm an innocent man.
Investigators say he raped 2 women in their 50s in California in 2018. And when that news broke, another woman came forward with accusations that he raped her in 2003, when she was 17 years old. Winslow told detectives he had consensual sex with the 2 women in 2018. Opening statements are expected Monday. He faces life in prison if convicted. Expect Law and Crime to have live, gavel-to-gavel coverage for the whole trial. I'm Rachel Stockman for the Law and Crime Network.
And still ahead here on the Daily Debrief, the case of horror on the highway. More witnesses shed light on whether a defendant in northern Vermont was legally insane when he drove the wrong way down an interstate and killed 5 teens in another car. We take you to that trial after the break. Before we head back to court, let's head to the newsroom for a look at what's coming up on Brian Ross Investigates. Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross himself is here with a look at what's in store. Brian, good evening.
Well, good afternoon, Aaron. Tonight, the whistleblower's lawsuit. As you know, Aaron, Kevin Costner is an actor who's often cast in the role as a man of integrity, a lawman. He's Elliot Ness or he's Wyatt Earp. But now an explosive new lawsuit alleges that he had a secret Swiss bank account, which, if true, would be against the law. Of course, Aaron, Mr. Costner vociferously denies this, says it's not true. So tonight on the program, Aaron, we're going to have the whistleblower himself, Bradley Birkenfeld, live, sticking to his guns about his complaint. Coming up right after your show, Aaron.
Can't wait to watch it. Brian Ross Investigates coming up at 5:30. And now back to the case of horror on the highway, where a Vermont man is accused of murdering 5 high school students. Stephen Burgoyne is facing 5 counts of second-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated operation, and 1 count of gross negligence. This police reconstruction video shows how authorities believe Burgoyne sped down the interstate in the wrong lane, swerved to the left, and slammed head-on into a vehicle carrying those 5's friends. None of the victims of that massive crash survived. One died at age 15. The others were all 16. After the first crash, Burgoyne stole a responding police car, turned around, and then caused a second crash on the highway. Testifying today was Dr. Vincent Garbitelli, who just happened to be an eyewitness at the crash scene. This is dashcam video of the doctor treating the defendant at the scene. Garbitelli was part of a prosecution rebuttal case. He says he does not believe the defendant was in a psychotic episode at the time.
And what does a psychotic episode look like?
A psychotic episode has a specific medical definition. It means that you become completely split off from reality. You have no understanding whatsoever of where you are in the world. You have no understanding who you are, and you are completely detached from reality. So psychosis is a clear medical term. It means you're completely separated from reality.
Okay, and based on your education and training and experience as a physician, at the time that you observed and examined this man on the ground who had been handcuffed, was this man in an acute psychotic episode?
Absolutely not.
Was he out of touch with reality?
Absolutely not.
Was he hallucinating?
He was not hallucinating.
Was he delusional?
He was not delusional.
Was he paranoid?
He was not paranoid.
Any thought disorganization?
There was no thought disorganization, and he cooperated with me to get his blood pressure, examine him, check his head, take his blood pressure, feel his pulse. There was no lack of cooperation during that time.
Yesterday, this key testimony came from a defense expert. She said that she did think the defendant was legally insane, but she also admitted that he threatened to do something crazy if he lost custody of his child.
Admit to talking to his brother about having despair and sadness and depression and vocalizing that he had nothing left to live for, though, correct?
Yes.
And further, he told you that he was referring to the fact that his career had fallen apart, his relationship had fallen apart, his finances were about to be lost, and everything going on with my daughter, there wasn't anything I could point to and say, well, I have this going for me. Do you recall that quote?
Yeah, it was definitely a period of hopelessness for him.
And you further confronted him on previous thoughts of suicide because you had reviewed an interview and a deposition with one of his best friends, Asima Kosovic. Is that correct?
Yes, he had told her, well, she had said to the police, he had said something along the lines of, she thought jokingly, but I might as well shoot everybody up or kill myself, something like that.
Specifically, he told Ms. Kosovic a couple of months before the crashes that if he loses his daughter, he was going to go off the deep end, and said something about getting a rifle and going around shooting everyone in sight.
Yes, and she thought he was joking at the time.
He also told her that he'd just go crazy and do something dramatic, correct?
Yes.
Two people who worked with the defendant testified during the state's rebuttal. A manager described minor workplace conflicts, but said they weren't necessarily out of the ordinary. A coworker said Burgoyne was lazy, complained about life problems, and testified that Burgoyne was once talked out of a suicide attempt by a brother. That coworker admitted Burgoyne blew up one time over a minor irritation. Judges Ashley Wilcott and Brendan Birmingham are back with us tonight. So, Judge Birmingham, what do you make of this? You've got the mother of the defendant's child saying he threw us in the back of his car and threatened to drive us right into a pond, harm us, potentially kill us if I didn't agree to a 50-50 custody split. You've got him telling friends that he'd go crazy and go on a shooting spree and shoot everybody in sight if he had custody issues. He was apparently suicidal over life issues. Who does this add up for? Does this add up for the defense saying this is insanity, or does this add up for the state saying he was just going to get back at the world for everything that he thought ailed him and he was sane?
That is going to help the state dramatically. When you have these types of cases, these insanity cases that we've been talking about so much recently here on Law&Crime, one of the things that we see is if the prosecutors can develop a motive for the killings, that always helps them. And here, this is a very typical, some would say, a domestic violence situation. He's going to get back at his wife, perhaps because she has taken away his children from him, or this is the motive that the state is going to develop. Plus, it also lets everybody know that this is something that he thought about ahead of time, and planning, again, shows a goal-oriented behavior, which is not insane behavior.
Judge Wilcott, do you agree?
I do agree, and I think that he's demonstrated a pattern of, if I don't get what I want, I'm going to make threats, and I'm going to be a bully, and I'm going to get what I want by threatening, and he didn't get what he wanted, and he chose an action of crossing the line and killing 5 kids.
I mean, talk about innocent victims here in every sense of the word. I mean, it's just so sad to think that Judge Birmingham, we have just a couple seconds left here, but we've got a really low burden of proof here. The burden's on the state in Vermont to prove insanity, but it's preponderance of the evidence. So if one grain of sand drops on the scales and indicates that there's insanity here, then the defense wins the case, and we've got about 10 seconds.
Well, yeah, the lower standard of proof helps the defense, but man, there sure are a lot of facts. Motive, planning, that's going to probably help the state quite a bit.
And that was a great closing argument, Judge Birmingham. You should be up there prosecuting the case in northern Vermont for the state, but you're a judge in Texas, so I understand you can't. Both judges appreciate your insights tonight on The Debrief. We will be back tomorrow at 5 o'clock Eastern for our recap of cases nationwide. Have a good night, folks.